Make it so, number one. Earl Grey, hot. It's Star Trek, Jim, but not as we know it. Not as we know it. Not as we know it. It's Star Trek, Jim, but not as we know it. Not as we know it, Jim. Star Trek burst back onto our screens this week in the first new television episode in over 10 years. That's right, Star Trek Discovery is here, and I'm going to talk about it. Now, the main point of this video is to talk about the inconsistencies that I noticed that bugged me a bit while watching, with the timeline and where it fits in with the other TV shows and what universe it fits in and things like that. But I thought very quickly I would just say what I think about it as well. Now, I watched the first 2 episodes last night and I thought there was some good, there was some bad. So let's be positive and start with the good. The acting, especially of the character of Michael, was great. She was a really engaging character, which is lucky because the whole focus of the series seems to be on her, which is a bit of a departure from Star Trek series' previous MOs where they've been ensemble casts. This one seems to be concentrating primarily just on the viewpoint and the experience of one character, and that character is Michael, and she is engaging, she's interesting. I think she did a really good job of portraying those personality traits you'd expect from someone that has been raised on Vulcan but is human.
How long until that storm comes crashing down on us?
I estimate 1 hour, 17 minutes, 22 seconds. Which is why I've made sure we're not lost.
She's measured, logical, but she still has the emotion, and that emotion does come out. I also really like the visual style in terms of the filming and the way they film shots and the way they frame shots and the type of cutaway shots they had, the pacing of it. I liked all of that. It clearly took some cues from the movies, from the more recent movies, and also just generally cinema. It felt very cinematic. Cinema and even modern TV now. It's keeping very up to date with that, and I like it. That works really well, and it keeps it a fast-paced, engaging TV series to watch. The focus on one character, though, isn't the only thing that breaks the mould from previous Star Trek series. It had a lot of darker tone with the war storyline. Now, some will argue that's not Star Trek. That Star Trek is all about hope and optimism and this bright future that, yes, they encounter bad guys, but they are bad guys, and generally our society, the Federation is in, is great and wonderful. And that is always a little bit boring. It's great to have that utopian vision, but if you don't get conflict, it's boring. You want conflict between the crew. That's what makes it interesting. So I'm glad we're getting a more of a sort of darker tone, a bit more of a conflicty tone. You know, our heroes in Starfleet don't always agree with each other.
Thousands of lives will be lost because of failure to act.
Whose lives? Victims of your imaginary war.
And that's good, I like that. But some people argue that's not what Star Trek is. However, I would say to them that one of my favourite series of Star Trek is Deep Space Nine, and that one is one that got a little bit darker, got a little bit more serialised, which the rest of Star Trek really wasn't. Especially towards the later seasons, which are my favourite. You had the war with the Dominions. This is not the first time that Star Trek will have told a serialised, darker war story. It may be going more darker and it may be going more serialised than Deep Space Nine, but that excites me. I like the sound of that. That sounds good. We don't actually see the Discovery in this first 2 episodes. The ship the series is named after, which again is unusual and breaking the mould of a Star Trek series, but it does kind of hint at that sort of longer, long game storytelling that I think could work. While the character of Michael was great, and there were some other interesting characters in there that showed potential, I think the writing overall was a little bit stifled. I don't know, there was... I'm unsure what I think about it, but I'm not yet convinced that it's top-notch writing. Better than old Star Trek, I'll give them that, but it's still not quite there as what I'd like it to be. And the only other thing about this, which is what the rest of this video is going to be about, is the blatant inconsistencies with the timeline of where it fits, and I don't know where it fits. I've got some theories, and they've said some stuff, but, well, let's just get to that, because there's some stuff that doesn't really fit with where they've said it slots in. The creators of the show have said that this takes place in the Prime timeline. Now, for those that don't know, that is the timeline that encapsulates the original series, all of the TV series. So the original series, The Next Generation, Enterprise, Voyager, Deep Space Nine, and all of the movies up to Nemesis. So all of the ones starring William Shatner and all the ones starring the Next Generation cast, all of those movies take place in the Prime timeline. All of those TV series take place in the Prime timeline. And then you've got the 3 J.J. Abrams movies which take place in what is referred to as the Kelvin timeline, or the Kelvin universe. Now, the creators have said this takes place in that Prime timeline, and 10 years before Kirk takes the helm of the Enterprise. So this is a decade before the original series. And that doesn't make a whole lot of sense with what we saw on screen. Now, they may explain a lot of this later on as we go, but so far they have me perplexed, and here's why. The Starfleet aesthetic. Those uniforms are snazzy, sure, but wait a damn minute. This show is set only 10 years before Kirk takes the captain's chair. This is a period we've seen before. In the original unaired pilot of Star Trek The Cage, footage from which was later used as archive footage in the original series episode The Menagerie. And the Enterprise of that time's crew are wearing significantly different uniforms, even though these take place in apparently the same time period. And no, this isn't just a case of different ships having different uniforms, because as we see in Star Trek Discovery, when they communicate to other Star Trek ships, the Admiral for instance, they all share this uniform. So it's not just that different ships have different uniforms. The second thing is the technology. The technology in Discovery is massively advanced for what it should be at the time it is set. I mean, just the fact that the use of holographic communication is widespread, despite the fact that the Federation had only just started using this technology at the time of the Dominion War over 100 years later. They're not even meant to have developed holodeck technology at this point. And then the Klingons revealed their cloaking device when they're not even meant to have cloaking devices yet. The Klingons, in established continuity, got their cloaking technology from an alliance with the Romulans, which doesn't happen for about another decade. And even if we assume that they did get it earlier than we see on screen in the original series and Next Generation and the movies and such, well, the Federation in the original series are surprised that cloaking technology exists, and yet they see it in Discovery 10 years before. It just doesn't make sense. Talking of the Klingons, what the heck is going on with them? Let's start with the obvious. How they look. Their look is radically different without any explanation. Not the first time Star Trek has done that, admittedly. In the original series they were practically human looking. They had smooth foreheads, just quite big eyebrows. Pretty much their only distinguishing feature in the original series. But with the first movie they got a major redesign, including adding the forehead ridges that everybody loves? Love's the right word? Let's go with loves. But this was eventually given an explanation, a vague hint of an explanation in the Deep Space Nine episode Trials and Tribulations.
They are Klingons, and it is a long story.
What happened? Some kind of genetic engineering? A viral mutation?
We do not discuss it with outsiders.
And a full-on backstory to the change in an Enterprise multi-part story. Basically, it involved genetic engineering, a retrovirus, and a cure that had some unfortunate side effects for the Klingons, like the disappearance of head ridges. The culture of the Klingons also seems a little bit different. They're still a warrior race, and there was always a little background of religious nature to them, with them believing they go to this great hall when they die of other warriors, but their adherence to an honour system was much more important to them than their religion, as it was portrayed in the original run of series. This seems to have changed somewhat with the new series, with religion being a much more important aspect to their society. Star Trek's races and groupings have always paralleled those that have been hot topics in our own culture at the time. So the Romulans were effectively an allegory of the Soviet Empire, with a Cold War and everything. And the Federation was effectively the UN. And the Klingons have sometimes been compared as an allegory to Japanese warrior culture, the samurai and such. You know, with the honor codes and things. But the new writers have seemingly chosen a different allegory. They have, I think, gone on record as saying that the Klingons in this new series more closely resemble the intolerable, inwardly looking culture and vileness of the white supremacists that are currently flaring up in our society, which is certainly one of the key challenges of our time, no mistake, and it makes sense that Star Trek would tackle them, as they do tackle many social issues that are around at the times the various series are produced. But is it really the Klingons? Don't you just have to change a bit too much for it to be them? I don't know, just a thought. Maybe they could have come up with a new race for that allegory. Another strange inconsistency is Michael herself, raised on Vulcan by Sarek, Spock's father.
As ghosts from the past, only logic can root us in the present.
Which effectively makes her Spock's adopted sister, and yet he's never mentioned her. Not once. Strange that. I mean, perhaps he didn't know of her existence. Perhaps Sarek kept them completely separate, never introduced them to each other. It's possible. Just seems a little unlikely. Or maybe Spock just never thought it was relevant to mention. He didn't mention he had a half-brother until it came up in a film plot. So, these kind of consistencies give me headaches. So how can they be explained? Well, the Klingons' looks, and even their culture to a certain degree, could be further products of the retrovirus we saw in Enterprise. Certain sects and families could have been affected in different ways. So we get the smooth-headed Klingons, and maybe we get some that lose their hair and get enlarged craniums, i.e. the ones we see in Discovery. At the time frame of Discovery, we know the Empire is divided. We know there are the great houses, all of which in the hologram form kind of look like the bald, elongated with some ridges. So that kind of questions my theory a little bit, but bear with me. One of the factions could be the smooth four-headed ones. They could be on the outskirts, not one of the great houses at the moment. But maybe they come to dominance within the next 10 years, and that's why we see them in the original series. The genetically pure ones, i.e. the ones we saw from the beginning of Enterprise period in time, that seemingly disappeared off the scene throughout the original series and also now Star Trek Discovery, maybe they have fallen from grace and the other genetically engineered ones have been taking over the last 100 years. But maybe they will reassert themselves ready in time for the movie era of timeline. But what about the rest? The visual differences, the uniform inconsistency, the advanced technology, it's all just... How do you reconcile that? What if the creators have lied to us? What if it's not set in the Prime universe at all? And even not in J.J. Abrams' Kelvin timeline? Jonathan Frakes, who played William Riker in The Next Generation and is directing some episodes of Discovery, has said that the mirror universe will be playing a part in this new series. That's the fan favourite universe where the good guys are often the bad guys and they all have goatee beards. Because decent bad guys have goatee beards. Well, as we know the universe hopping will be part of the plot, what if Destiny is part of a completely different universe? Not the Prime, not the Kelvin, not the mirror. They exist in a universe we haven't seen yet. It would explain the inconsistencies and leave open the exciting possibility of crossovers with both Prime and Kelvin timeline characters. And it's the only way I can make it all make sense in my head. But I want to know what you think. Let me know in the comments below whether or not you like this new series, whether or not you care that there are inconsistencies, and if you do care, what do you think is your solution? What would be the best solution to these inconsistencies based on what we've seen on screen? What could they be coming up with? What do you think is likely? What do you want to see? Let me know in the comments below. Please do like this video and don't forget to share, subscribe and all that jazz because I do more videos like this talking about pop culture-y things like TV shows, movies, Doctor Who, books, those kind of things all the time. I say all the time, like once every week or so. I do other stuff in between, celebrate holidays, that kind of thing. So, I would love for you to hop on board and see more. And don't forget to let me know what you think of the new Star Trek series. Ciao!